Ukraine's overnight retaliation paralyzes Moscow, inflicting $1.1 billion blow on Russia.
Today, Russia woke up to the consequences of a decision that triggered a strategic reversal for Russia in a single night over the span of a single night. While diplomatic pressure and public discussion of negotiations dominated international headlines, Moscow chose escalation instead of restraint. The Kremlin expected that sustained pressure would produce Ukrainian fatigue and political collapse. What followed was the opposite. Ukraine activated a coordinated retaliation that reached deep into Russian territory, disrupted internal security, and paralyzed the daily rhythm of the capital. By the end of the sequence, the combined short-term disruption to aviation, emergency response activity, air defense expenditure, and reported industrial damage was assessed at approximately $1.1 billion, reflecting disruption and response costs rather than destruction alone. To understand why this moment mattered, the sequence must be traced from the beginning. During the early hours of the morning, Russian forces launched one of the largest combined aerial pressure campaigns of the war. The operation extended across multiple axes, from occupied Crimea to the Donbas region. More than 1,600 one-way attack drones were deployed alongside 653 reconnaissance and strike-capable unmanned aerial vehicles and 51 missiles of mixed types. The strikes were not limited to frontline military formations. According to Ukrainian assessments and publicly available reporting, the campaign focused heavily on power generation facilities, electrical substations, and urban infrastructure nodes. The strategic logic was clear. By targeting energy distribution during winter conditions, Moscow aimed to degrade civilian resilience, disrupt daily life, and apply political pressure without committing to a decisive ground breakthrough. Russian leadership calculated that sustained infrastructure degradation would weaken Ukraine's bargaining position. At the same time, diplomatic messaging from Washington intensified pressure on Kyiv. Public statements and background commentary attributed to US political circles emphasized that any negotiated settlement would require concessions. Suggestions circulated that withdrawal from parts of Donbas was a necessary component of progress. In Moscow, this combination of military pressure and diplomatic signaling was interpreted as momentum. The Kremlin expected Ukraine to absorb the strikes, limit retaliation, and arrive at negotiations from a weakened position. That calculation proved incorrect. By 11:40 p.m., Ukrainian long-range strike units activated a retaliatory plan that had been prepared as a contingency. This was not presented as an improvised reaction, but as the execution of a pre-planned option designed for escalation scenarios. What followed became one of the largest coordinated drone operations directed at Russian territory since the start of the conflict. The targets were selected to serve layered objectives, saturate air defense systems, disrupt civilian aviation, and strike industrial facilities that support the Russian war economy. Northern Russia, including the broader Moscow metropolitan area, became the focal zone. Minutes after the first wave crossed into Russian airspace, civil aviation authorities began issuing emergency notices. Airspace over Moscow and surrounding regions was progressively restricted as air defense units reported inbound aerial targets. By 12:15 a.m., multiple airports serving the capital entered partial shutdown. Aircraft on approach were ordered into holding patterns, and departures were suspended as precautionary measures expanded in line with airspace safety protocols. Inside Moscow's airports, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Waiting areas filled beyond capacity as flights were delayed and cancelled. Passengers sat on floors, leaned against walls, and spread coats on the ground to rest. Public announcements instructed travelers to move away from windows and gather in interior corridors. Explosions reported in districts such as Odintsovo and Ramenskoye were audible inside terminal buildings, and even to flight crews seated in aircraft parked on the aprons. For many civilians, the war was no longer distant. By 1:20 a.m., at least 7 explosions were reported over the Tula region. These detonations, combined with continuous air defense fire, showed that interception efforts were active but under strain. Even when drones were shot down, falling debris and shockwaves contributed to panic and operational disruption. The defensive response likely reduced physical damage in central areas, but it could not prevent widespread interruption to movement, aviation schedules, and public confidence. Within hours, all of Moscow's major airports, Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, and Vnukovo, were fully closed. More than 170 flights were marked cancelled in the capital alone. Across Russia, over 400 flights were cancelled. Airspace restrictions around Moscow lasted up to 7 hours. This was not a routine delay, but a systemic shutdown of civilian aviation in the country's political and economic core. The resulting disruption to logistics, passenger accommodation, security mobilization, and emergency staffing formed a significant portion of the assessed $1.1 billion impact. Russian aviation authorities later confirmed that restrictions extended beyond Moscow to other strategic hubs, including Grozny and Makhachkala. Diplomatic travel was affected alongside civilian traffic. The aircraft carrying Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan was reported to have circled while airspace restrictions and runway availability were managed. The episode illustrated how quickly routine state functions became vulnerable under sustained airspace alerts. For roughly 20 million residents of Moscow that night, the conflict ceased to be abstract. Explosions were visible from residential windows. Air defense fire illuminated the sky. The separation between the front line and the capital narrowed sharply, producing an immediate psychological shock across the civilian population. As the aviation crisis unfolded, a second layer of Ukraine's operation became visible through reports of strikes against industrial targets. Long-range drones penetrated deep into Russian territory at low altitude, exploiting radar-blind zones and gaps created by defensive saturation. One of the first reported industrial targets was the PAO Akron chemical complex in Veliki Novgorod. While publicly described as a fertilizer producer, the facility is associated with chemical supply chains relevant to explosives manufacturing. Around midnight, 6 explosions were reported, and parts of the facility were described as damaged, with operations halted pending assessment. Almost simultaneously, strikes were reported at the Dorogobuj nitrogen fertilizer plant and an adjacent thermal power facility in the Smolensk region. These sites are linked to ammonium nitrate-related production chains used in defense manufacturing. The intent, as implied by the target set and Ukrainian messaging, was not to cause immediate frontline collapse, but to constrain future production capacity by disrupting upstream industrial nodes. By the time Russian authorities issued a red alert for the Lipetsk region, Ukrainian UAVs were already approaching Moscow's outer defense ring. The capital's layered air defense network, often portrayed as comprehensive, was forced into continuous engagement mode. Interceptors were launched repeatedly. While many threats were likely neutralized, the duration of closures and repeated alerts indicated that coverage failed to prevent sustained penetration under saturation conditions. The operational shockwave extended to St. Petersburg. In the city's commercial sector, a large market fire erupted following reports of explosions. The building suffered extensive damage. Emergency responders deployed chemical and radiometric laboratories to assess potential hazards. The cause of the incident was not immediately confirmed in public statements, and authorities did not formally link it to the drone operation, even as speculation circulated online. The consequences of the strikes extended beyond visible damage. In winter conditions, electricity disruptions carry cascading risks. Central heating systems rely on electrically powered pumps. When power fails, circulation stops. In sub-zero temperatures, stagnant water can freeze, expand, and rupture pipes. Once such damage occurs, restoring heating can take weeks or longer, even after electricity is restored. High-rise buildings also lose elevators and water pumps, accelerating hygiene and safety risks. Hospitals face fuel constraints for backup generators, placing intensive care units and dialysis services under strain. Communication networks falter as base station generators exhaust reserves. Banking transactions slow or halt. ATMs stop dispensing cash. the digital economy contracts rapidly, replaced by shortages and rumor-driven anxiety. These second-order effects amplify the impact of infrastructure disruption far beyond the initial strike. As communication systems experienced interruptions, the Kremlin's ability to manage public perception visibly weakened. A question began circulating among Russian citizens. If Moscow's airports could be shut down for 7 hours despite extensive defense spending, how secure are homes in Tula, Voronezh, or Novgorod? Amateur videos showing explosions and air defense activity spread quickly online. The message was implicit. The protective shield remained active, but it was no longer perceived as absolute. Throughout this sequence, Vladimir Putin remained inside the Kremlin, meeting with military leadership. Official statements emphasized continuity and resolve. The war would continue, and negotiations would not alter Russia's objectives. Yet outside the Kremlin walls, transportation was halted, industrial facilities were disrupted, and civilian confidence absorbed a visible shock. The timing of Ukraine's response carried diplomatic significance. It coincided with narratives suggesting Ukrainian exhaustion and growing international pressure on Kyiv. By executing this operation, President Volodymyr Zelensky signaled that Ukraine retained escalation capacity and would not enter negotiations from a position of enforced weakness. The objective was to forcibly reset perceptions of leverage at a critical diplomatic moment. This was not solely a defensive reaction. It was a demonstration of reach. Ukraine employed long-range strike systems referenced in its messaging, including extended-range Neptune variants, Palinitsia drones, and Sapsan missile concepts, to demonstrate that Russian depth was no longer guaranteed sanctuary. Parallel operations targeted a tanker linked in reporting to Russia's shadow fleet in the Black Sea, applying additional economic pressure. The Kremlin now faces difficult trade-offs. Reinforcing air defenses around major cities reduces flexibility on the front lines. Maintaining frontline coverage leaves domestic infrastructure exposed. Each choice reallocates finite resources and accelerates strain on the broader war effort. By morning, life in Moscow remained disrupted. Airports reopened gradually. Damage assessments continued. The image of control suffered a visible blow. The estimated $1.1 billion impact reflected not only reported industrial disruption and aviation paralysis, but the strategic cost of exposed vulnerabilities and constrained options. In the end, Russia's gamble failed to produce capitulation. Instead, it brought the war closer to Russia's own population centers and forced the country into a visible emergency posture. Ukraine's message was clear. The battlefield is no longer confined to distant front lines. The myth of Russian invulnerability itself became a target. And as the smoke cleared, one question remained. If this pressure continues, can Russia adapt fast enough? Or will the disruption spread even further? Share your thoughts in the comments section below.